Guys, I'm just going to tell you ahead of time, this one is going to go off of the rails. This one is going to get weird, wild, and wacky, and I promise I'm going to attempt to land it. I'm going to attempt to bring it back to the center, but there you can probably tell from the presence of Disney princes that there is something strange afoot for this short story discussion. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for another short story discussion, which will appear in two separate playlists here on the channel. Number one, the short story discussion playlist, and number two, the Ernest Hemingway Short Story by Short Story read along. I believe this is like the 27th part of that series, so we are zooming right along. We have a read along for 10th of December by George Saunders already on the channel. We have a short story by short story read along for William Faulkner that we're just starting up. Dubliners by James Joyce. We've done short story by short story, and we're going through Let Me Tell You by Shirley Jackson as well. But right now we are here for Ernest Hemingway, Chez Ti dice la Patria by Ernest Hemingway. We will have a So What Happened recap, a literary criticism, and a writer's corner portion of this video. So what happened? We find our protagonist and his journey mate, Guy, as they begin their mission first through Spezia. And they have a literal hanger-on, a man who identifies as a fascist, and though he is rude, he is willing to ride on the top of the car in order to get a little part of his journey covered by car as opposed to by foot. He gets off of the car outside of Spezia, and the men go to Spezia and stop for a meal where a woman inside the restaurant tries to get a little bit of ghee for her own take-home. There is a man at the opposite table who tells the women that work at the restaurant, leave them alone. They are worthless. They have nothing. I believe that man, they are worth nothing, by the way. So I believe that man works at the restaurant as well. The protagonist makes sure to tell us that he is sitting there writing. I think that what he's probably doing is working on the books for the restaurant, but neither here nor there, perhaps. The men then leave, and the weather is bad during their journey. Lots of rain, lots of wind, all of this, and they pass a fascist on a bike. But while they are stuck at a railroad crossing, the fascist on a bike who has a gun on his back catches up with them and fines them for having a dirty license plate, 25 lira. Give it to me now. But when our protagonist protests, saying that the license plate is dirty because of the roads, the fascist then says, "Oh, okay, 50 lira," and he pays up, and our protagonist says, "Now you need to change the receipt so that it says 50 lira," because he knows the guy is trying to pocket the extra 25 lira. So the fascist grabs the receipt and changes the 25 lira to 50 and gives it back to the protagonist, who says, "No, change it on your end so that when you go and report to the party, they know you have that extra 25 lira." And the fascist at least pretends to do so. Now, the first thing that we actually have to do here to get off of the table immediately, Chez Ti dice la Patria, means what does the homeland tell you? So we will get into what this means a little bit, but there are some questions as to what the homeland is. Now, obviously, the phrase is in Italian, so you can take this as what does the homeland tell you, the homeland being perhaps South Germany, though I don't think our travelers are from South Germany, and we will get into that as well. But the homeland being Italy. What does Italy tell you? Italy, a place for which Hemingway definitely had, I almost said Frankenstein because we're going through that book on the chapter by chapter on the channel right now as well, but a place for which Hemingway had a great deal of love and respect. He went and fought there in World War I. That will come back later in this video as well. But it would also be, what is the homeland of fascism telling you? What does the homeland say to you? Now, if we want to get into a little bit of interesting discussion based on this short story, here's where I want to start. We have the two men stopping in Spezia, however you say it, I don't know, and they're getting themselves a meal, and the waitress attempts to seduce Guy. And we get this passage. The girl wore a one-piece dress. She leaned forward against the table and put her hands on her breasts and smiled. She smiled better on one side than on the other side, and turned the good side toward us. The charm of the good side had been enhanced by some event which had smoothed the other side of her nose, in as warm wax can be smoothed. Her nose, however, did not look like warm wax. It was very cold and firmed, only smoothed in. You like me? She asked Guy. Now, this is an interesting paragraph because it is about overt sexuality. It is about trying to proposition, trying to seduce. Why then, in that paragraph, would one mention the nose? Well, lucky for you, I have a weird theory, perhaps completely out of left field, and we're going to talk about it. So, can we accept that there is a difference between sexy and beautiful? Both are attractive. One, we have to say, assume, is nice to look at. We have to assume that beautiful is nice to look at. Sexy, not necessarily nice to look at, but attractive in a different, more carnal, more animalistic way. It used to be old world, old world. And I don't know how new. I mean, all the references that I have seen to this are old world references, like ancient literature type references, or literature written to be as if it were ancient literature. It used to be assumed that the male nose, the size of a man's nose, correlated with the size of his member. If he had a big nose, he had a big member. So there is something carnal about a big nose. It is, why would you associate the nose with the sexuality? I think there is something deep within us that does this. Now, in this argument, there is a difference on some level, at least sociologically, between male sexuality and female sexuality. Men's rougher side is often accepted in their character. Men's uncivilized side is accepted in their character. It is seen as a more holistic part of them. Their sexuality is seen as one in the same. In the world of literature, there is something known as the virgin whore dichotomy, that oftentimes women are represented in literature, in stories, in the subconscious, right? That's the way that the subconscious works out, is through stories, as virginal or whore. Now, I think that there is certainly nuance to be had in there. I'm not the biggest or firmest believer in those arguments, but they're there, and they can be observed time and again throughout literature, that there is a pure woman and there is the not pure woman, right? There's no virgin whore dichotomy for men, but I think that there is something that we will get to in a moment. Now, when we think about women, they're in that virgin whore dichotomy. If we're talking about things which are sort of subconscious, but in the ether of society, you're talking about. I'll just throw it out there. When you talk about the stereotypical portrayal of a witch, what is this? The Regardless of where you're finding a portrayal of a witch, probably she has an oversized nose. It is uncivilized. It is not tamed. It is not domestic. A witch is not domestic. So we just subconsciously, through generations, draw witches with bigger noses. One of the things that witches are feared to do is to seduce. That is one of the big, scary things about witches. They will seduce you, right? Why do I have several drawings of Disney princes on the screen right now? Well, I'll tell you. The nose size correlating to sexuality is something that I think is there, that I think is real, that I think we do without noticing it. Animators are very good. Animators are very good at taking things that you think and you don't know why you think and making you see them. Disney animators in particular have done this for decades. Here we have the Beast. Now, the Beast is not really based on any one particular animal. So why does he have that big old schnoz? The Beast is representative in the Beauty and the Beast of the untamed, uncivilized, undomesticated male. A male who is big and powerful and is unbridled in all ways. That includes, you're not going to see this in a children's adaptation, but that includes sexuality. On this side is the prince into whom that beast turns. Do you notice anything about his nose? Very cute nose. Very small nose. Looks like to have an English nose, what is known as the English nose, which is known as handsome, right? The English nose, the small crook, the smaller nose itself. Down here, we have Tarzan. Tarzan is the wild, unbridled, uncivilized, undomesticated fantasy of a man that is to be tamed, right? This is the prince from The Little Mermaid. In The Little Mermaid, interestingly, it is the female protagonist, I do not remember her name, who is the wild one, who is the undomesticated, meaning that the man here represents what is civilized, what is domestic, what is human, right? What is as opposed to the animal that is human, what is the domestic part of what is human? Not a great big schnoz. Tarzan, great big schnoz. Now, I think the way that we view sexuality is different for men and women as well. Men's sexuality is commonly accepted as part of their behavior. Men's sexuality is commonly accepted as part of them. They are sexual. Women are expected to hide that, right? Women are expected not to incorporate that into part of their character. But a man's charisma is part of his sexuality. Interestingly, if you were to Google what women are the most beautiful women in the world, you'll get all sorts of lists. You will get, and I just sort of took note on this, Russian women, Brazilian women, Filipino women, Polish women, Swedish women, Venezuelan women. None of them, and so you're looking at this way, sort of an ethno-state. Everything outside of the United States is basically ethno-state, right? Russian women are, when you say Russian women, you have something in your mind. When you say Venezuelan women, you have an image of a Venezuelan woman, Brazilian woman, Filipino woman. You have something in your mind that looks like. For men, the demographic that often rises to the top is Italian. Italians, men and women, one of the characteristics of Italian is a larger nose. Italian women do not appear on those lists. Not traditionally. But when you ask who are the best lovers in the world, Italian women are on those lists. Italian men are on those lists. So I think that there is something to be said about the idea of the nose and sexuality. Again, I told you, we're getting real weird. We're getting real weird real fast. When I talked about the reliability of the narrator, so again, this will come back. Large nose, uncivilized, large nose, undomesticated, small nose, refined, small nose, domesticated, civilized, uncivilized. We're going to come back to those ideas later in this video. Do we have a reliable narrator? That was an awkward conversation to have, wasn't it? When the men are in the restaurant, the waitress is asking them, who are you? Where are you from? All this stuff. And our protagonist answers, we are South German. The South Germans are gentle, lovable people. Press X for doubt. Because if I were to tell you I am American, Americans are brash and hard-headed. We don't put that part out there. We don't feel it's necessary. Meaning that the narrator is trying to project something. Also, this woman does speak German. When these men are speaking to each other, she doesn't understand them. So if they were South German and they were speaking German to each other, when he says, we are South German, she would have been in on their conversation because she knows German. So we have a narrator that is not telling the truth. The next thing I want to talk about here, car technology. This short story was published in 1927. Henry Ford's first assembly line was completed in 1913. So cars, even at this point, were not quite ubiquitous. When we read about the car in this story, the radiator was smoking, the windshield wipers were there, but they weren't worth a whole lot. You have a man who is willing to ride on the top of the car. This suggests they're not going all that fast. If they were going 60 miles an hour, you're not going to catch them on the top of the car while they're moving, right? So these are cars that we would recognize, but that we would not want to drive ourselves. This is an in-between technology between the very first cars and the cars that we have today. Interesting about that, though cars were not ubiquitous, though cars were not all that commonplace, the government, even the fascist ones, already had organized a way to milk them. We have the license plate already being a thing. We have the idea of fines for not having a clean license plate. The government, no matter how fast your technology innovates, the government will be there in order to take its piece, to take a little bit off the top. Now, on to the meat of this story. Apparently, this is based on an account from Hemingway's actual life, where he went to Italy in order to get a paper from a priest who had blessed him while he was injured during World War I. Ernest Hemingway was in World War I on the side of Italy, driving an ambulance, driving coffee and chocolate to the front lines. Depends on who you're getting the story from. I'm not real big on biography for authors. I don't really care. I just want to know what they wrote. But was injured and was returning to Italy. Here's the interesting thing here. The thing which they never got, right? They return. What did we come here to do? We came here to get the thing we never got. That's kind of what they say to each other in the story. Sirens are getting real close, guys. I got to go. The idea here is that there was that paper that the narrator needs. We never get that idea in the short story. We just get the fact that there was something they had come to get and they didn't get it. So why? It's not really a MacGuffin in the story. What are we doing in this short story? What is the point of this short story? Well, I think that's the point of the short story. What is the homeland telling you? The homeland is telling you that everything has gone to pot. The homeland is telling you nothing works anymore. The homeland is telling you that we have returned to the carnal uses of sex and power. The homeland is telling you that this descent into fascism means that everything is dirty. The roads are dirty, so dirty that your license plate gets dirty, and then you get pulled over because the road made your license plate dirty, and then you get fined for having a dirty license plate, and then you pay your taxes to fix the roads. Everyone is milking you from every direction. Now, very important point in this very important point in this argument. That fascist, the fascist who pulls them over, he has a gun on his back, right? The protagonist in this story does argue with him, but ultimately he pays that fine. We're coming back to something here. In the wake of the turn to fascism, everything breaks down. Our narrator has set up a meeting to come and get something that is very important to him. When he gets there, he cannot get it. Doesn't work. They are stopping by these roadside diners. Doesn't work. Everything is corrupt in this roadside diner, and the waitress is trying to seduce Guy, trying to use her power of sex to lure him. The fascist who is hanging on to the car at the beginning of the story. What's the point of that point of the story? What is the point of that part of the story? That guy doesn't have his own car. He can't get there. He's going to have to walk. He doesn't want to have to walk. He's going to have to walk a long ways, 20 kilometers. When everything has gone to pot, people lose the civilization part of them. People lose the domesticated part of them. These two handsome princes on the right, they go from these guys backwards to these guys. These guys who use might and power. These guys whose sexuality, the nose, is worn right there on their face. Sex and violence. Both types of power. This is what this civilization has turned to as fascism has emerged. That is a very important point in this short story. That is, in my opinion, the entire point of this short story. Fascism is breaking out. Society is breaking down. And when society breaks down, it is not this. It is not the human part of you that wins. It is the animal part of you that wins. It is the animal part of you that gets ahead. Your strength, your violence, your sex. Those are the things that win for you when there is no society, when there is no culture, when there is no civilization, when there is no domestication to be had. That is what we are seeing happen in the short story and the places that we're going. So the one thing that I have for a writer's corner note is this. I want to share a little bit of the end of the story and talk about it then. As we waited, the fascist came up on his bicycle. The train went by, and Guy started the engine. "Wait," the bicycle man shouted from behind the car. "Your number's dirty." I got out the rag. The number had been cleaned at lunch. "You can read it," I said. "You think so?" "Read it." "I cannot read it. It is dirty." I wiped it off with a rag. "How's that?" 25 lira. "What?" I said. "You could have read it. It's only dirty from the state of the roads. You don't like Italian roads? They are dirty. 50 lira, he spat. Your car is dirty, and you are dirty too. Good. And give me the receipt with your name. He took out a receipt book, made up a duplicate, and perforated it so one side could be given to the customer and the other side filled in and kept as a stub. There was no carbon to record what the customer's ticket said. Give me 50 lira. He wrote in indelible pencil, tore out the slip, and handed it to me. I read it. This is for 25 lira. A mistake, he said, and changed it to 25 to 50. And now the other side. Make it say 50, in the part you keep. He smiled a beautiful Italian smile, and wrote something on the receipt stub, holding it so I could not see. In the entirety of this part of the story, Hemingway does not tell us how any of these people feel. Hemingway does not use any adverbs. He is not telling us what these people are thinking. He is just giving us what happens. He does not tell us he wrote vigorously, 50 lira. He does not tell us he spat into the road angrily. He does not tell us he smiled menacingly. That would all take away from the experience of the story. Hemingway trusts his reader to get there. Here, that is something which is fairly obvious. In short stories like Hills Like White Elephants, which we just did on the channel not too long ago, it is not quite so obvious. In Hills Like White Elephants, that is why the short story has lived for so long. Because the innumerable interpretations of what is going on in that short story. If you read one line one different way, one line with one different intonation, one line with a little less sarcasm, one line with more sarcasm, all of these things change that short story to an extreme degree. That is where literature happens. That is where the interpretation is found. That is where being a stronger or weaker reader helps or hurts you. And some of the more interesting readings of things like that are when you don't get it, right? When you don't understand what's happening. So maybe you try one different intonation here and it changes the entire story. That is a strength, not a weakness. Hemingway does not have to tell us that the man spat into the road angrily, because it's not something that you do out of joy. Hemingway does not have to tell us that he smiled a menacing smile, because it's actually scarier if he smiles a beautiful Italian smile, because he knows he's getting away with it. Yeah, I'll do it, right? He's smiling a beautiful Italian smile, not smiling menacingly. There will be no repercussions for him. There will be no consequences for him. He gets to just do this with impunity. So he's not giving you, the reader, the emotions of the fascist. He's just telling you what it looks like. So that is a strength in writing. Make it so that you don't write it so that you don't have to say too many words. Using the fewest words possible, give us the entire story, because that is a more pure and whole example of the story. That is a more pure and whole depiction of what it is that happened. That is all I have for this short story discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance, but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on the channel. There's poetry every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.